On the 82nd day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 82 cats a frying. We're talking Alf's Special Christmas. Hit it. It was 1987. Def Leppard had Hysteria, Schwarzenegger fought a predator, and Gordon Shumway learned the meaning of Christmas at a hospital. I'm your host, Jerry D., with another episode of Totally Rad Christmas, the podcast that talks all things Christmas in the 80s. Toys, movies, specials, music, and fads. If it was gnarly during Christmas in the 80s, we got it covered. Now, joining me is a Totally Rad Christmas all-star. You'll know him from the Holiday Shopping and Wish Books episode, Vinnie Brezinsky. Vinnie, how's it going?
Jerry, thanks for that introduction. Good. I don't know about all-star, but I'll take
it. You're an all-star to me. I guess I needed another name for recurring guests instead of all-star. Maybe like Elf or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take all-star. You know, I'm no Anthony, but you know, I'll get there.
Anthony definitely. He and Tom, I think, are vying for first place there. Although my brother really wants in, so I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I would say more. You know, they're rock star, right? I'm all-star. They're rock star. You know.
Well, to me, you're definitely an all-star. So.
Excellent.
So, Alf. What do you remember about Alf, man?
It's funny because the wife and I, right when we first started dating, I started watching reruns of it, and at first she was like, "You're watching Alf?" And then I just remember when I was younger, right? You know, the puppet, it was a little bit out there. You know, you had this little furry guy, and you know, it was out there. And I think, and I know some animal people are going to hate me, but I think this is where my hatred for cats comes. I'm a big animal person. Everyone knows I'm a big dog guy if you listen to the last episode, but I don't dislike cats, but you know, I think Alf, you know, got me on the wrong path there. But yeah, I mean, I remember growing up, they had him in, I think it was Burger King, you know, stuff. There was Burger King Happy Meals or whatever they were called. And he had trading cards, I believe. I mean, he was pretty popular back in 87. And I mean, you know, with Hysteria and the Predator coming out, it's a good year for Alf's Christmas special to come out, right?
For real, yeah. Well, it's so funny. They licensed, like, I guess the show didn't do as well as they thought it was going to be. They were like banking on it to be like this huge game changer kind of thing, and it didn't really do that well. And so the only way that they kind of were able to keep it in production was by licensing out the character. So he has like comic books. He has a cartoon. I think there was even some toys, and for sure there was definitely, like you said, commercials and tie-ins for different fast food companies.
I think he was in a couple episodes of other stuff as well. Like he was like I know he had his own talk show, didn't he? He had
I think he did.
And he had like Ed McMahon as a sidekick as well. But I think he did a couple, you know, other, because I think the show was on NBC, right? I think he was on other episodes of stuff on NBC. But
it's so funny because you know, with a character like Alf, it's really hard to place it because you want, you know, the puppet kind of, you want the kids to come in, but at the same time it's got to be adult enough for the adults to stay tuned, you know, every week. And so it's funny because the character has some funny slapstick moments here and there, but a lot of his jokes are very like adult oriented.
Yeah. Well, I was reading that, you know, with that, it was more adult oriented at first. In the first episode, apparently he drank a beer, and that was the only episode, you know, that they did that. Because I thought I remember more of him drinking beer, but maybe it was only that one. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it. I went back and I'm going through some of his humor, even in this special. I'm sitting here and I'm just like, yeah, this is a little adult. You know, it's you know, it's a little more than I remember, but I mean, it wasn't like the other shows you were watching at the time, right? Married with Children or you know, any of that other kind of stuff, but it was still more adult than I remembered.
Yeah, you kind of had to have lived through some things to understand all the humor there.
Yeah.
I remember most just loving Willie and the interplay between him and Alf. Like I always thought that was hilarious for some reason. And then seeing it this particular episode that we're going to talk about was not that hilarious between Willie and Alf. I mean,
No.
it was all right, but I think just in general, this whole special is like very Debbie Downer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, my wife and I sat down and watched it again the other night, and we're sitting here. We're like, "This is sad." I honestly I think I had a tear in my eye at one point. I'm like,
I did too. Yeah.
I'm like, am I crying on an Alf episode? But
Alf
yeah,
cries in the episode too.
right. But it was like I said, I just don't remember this one. Maybe I watched the other ones, but it was I don't know if it was a two-parter on the thing, but when I was watching it on whatever you told me to watch it on Roku TV, I think we watched it on. It was like a 40-minute episode one, and then there was like 20 minutes episode. So I don't know if they brought it up, but yeah, it was deep for for Alf. I was like, oh, they got me, guys. You got me.
So I guess it's it's a classic special. Like people remember the Alf Christmas special as, one of those Christmas specials on TV that's just has it all. But yeah, it's definitely deep there. And I didn't remember how bad it was, honestly, but it got me. And the funny thing is there's like a lot of little plot threads that kind of interweave. And they like try to cram it all, I think, into this one special. And I think it kind of works overall. I really dug it.
Yeah, with the whole thing with going back with Alf and Willie, like you're going back in his style, the way he says his lines is so different than everyone else. Like he kind of reminds me of like a poor man's Christopher Walken.
Yes,
with the way he delivers, he's like, "Well, Alf, you don't understand," and I'm like, just put it in one sentence, guy. Just do it. Just let it roll off. But I'm sitting there. I'm like, poor man's, Christopher Walken. But like, I'm looking through the cast, right? And I don't think any of them really did much more beside Alf.
No.
I think they were on Heart to Heart or some. There was like two of them were on like one of the early '80s TV shows. But beside that, I don't think the little kid did anything.
No, and I know Max Wright, Willie. He went on to Broadway, I think, after this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I also know he was diagnosed with cancer, like lymphoma.
Okay.
And so I think that kind of affected some of it as well. And so, of course, later on, he kind of had some run-ins with alcoholism and stuff like that. But it's funny because I remember the mom most as Bess from Ladybugs with Rodney Dangerfield.
So that's the same thing my wife said. She was like, I think she was at Ladybugs.
Yeah. That's like the only other thing I remember seeing her in, which is kind of terrible. But at the same time, it's like, oh, I used to love Ladybugs, and of course now watching it, it's like, oh, this movie's problematic.
So,
but
I mean, it didn't age well. It didn't.
No, it really didn't. But yeah, I know also there was like crazy technical difficulties with the show. I know that most of the cast was unhappy. I think at one point, Max Wright, who played Willie, even would yell at the crew, like call them Hussein, as in reference to Saddam Hussein and his regime. And
yeah, they said with the puppeteers and stuff like that I was reading that it could take them like a full day to do like one episode with 22 minutes at the time, because with commercials I think it's around 22 minutes.
About 22, yeah.
And I also read that the guy who is Alf, the puppeteer, wasn't the nicest guy in the world either. I forget his name, but they brought him. They brought him back for like one of the anniversary episodes for NBC, I think, and then I think him and Tina Fey got into it, and so he's not. Of course, he's one of the nicer guys to work with either.
There you go. Yeah, all I heard was there was no joy on set. Now, this episode, there's some joy in this episode, and I really enjoyed that part. But yeah, it's also, as we mentioned, it gets very deep and very heavy.
So the one thing about this episode, and maybe I'm wrong, you can correct me. One of my favorite things about Alf was the theme song. Right? I mean, I think the theme song was iconic. The dun 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 dun. But it was this episode was so serious. I don't even think they did the theme song.
No, they didn't. Which, I mean, how do you not do it? But I think also because, I mean, basically, I guess we can just dive into it. So, long story short, if we want to nutshell it, essentially, Alf learns the meaning of Christmas while at a hospital. I mean, that's like the nutshelled version. That leaves out a ton of stuff. But it starts off with the Tanners and ALF driving up to spend Christmas at a cabin that Willie, the dad, used to spend Christmas with his family, because a kind gentleman saw that his dad was unemployed, like he lost his job. They couldn't pay the mortgage. They were basically about to be kicked out and living on the streets when Mr. Foley, that gentleman, offered them to spend Christmas at least, and stay for a bit in the cabin. And of course, there's no electricity, so there's no TV, no microwaves, nothing like that. And as they're driving, we get another one of the classic, Alf loves to eat cats bits when he's singing the 12 Days of Christmas song, and he's like on day 82, and he's talking about cats frying and boiling and baking and roasting, and it's just classic Alf. Oh, man. But they're driving. Of course, everybody's getting annoyed with him. And then Willie kind of says, "Oh, I love it here. We grew, I spent Christmas here, and I'm so glad we got it." And they start unloading. And that's basically where we start off the episode with, is them at this cabin, which I'd completely forgotten. I remembered the hospital, but I'd completely forgotten about this cabin subplot, like that's the whole reason why they're in this part of the country.
Now, for me, I don't know about you, but I thought it was a little different, right? Because the cabin wasn't a normal set view. It seemed like you could tell that they were actually in a cabin. It's not the normal sitcom view where you get the laugh track or whatever. Right. Weird lighting, and there's a whole bunch. It's hard to explain unless you see it, but it's just like, this isn't a normal setting for an 80s sitcom. I mean, it was different. It was good, but you went into it, and the lighting was just really bad in the cabin, and certain shots weren't the best, and sometimes when the light came in, it was a lot brighter. But I thought that was different. Like I went back, and just like you, I don't remember the cabin. I remember the hospital. It's different. It's a nice little twist because it comes in later, into the whole plot. So they built it in, but yeah, I forgot about that as well.
Yeah, and so it's just one of those things. They're talking about Christmas. Alf at this point really just doesn't get Christmas. He has no idea at all, kind of, which is funny because they had a Christmas episode in that first season.
Yep.
But he still just hasn't quite gotten a handle on the whole thing. And so he's wearing like Willie's sweater that he was going to get for Christmas. He opened up all the presents. He changed all the tags to say that all the gifts were from him. He started spoiling what the presents were for everybody else. And so there's like that bit where he's like, I didn't tell him, or I guess he breaks it to the kid that he's getting a bicycle for Christmas. And then he's like, "Oh, don't worry, I didn't tell him it was red."
And Willie's like, "You ruined it." He's like, "Well, it's not really red, so I didn't ruin it. We're good."
Yeah. There's a whole little thing there between him and Willie's just so frustrated at this point with Alf, with all the presents. But I love how they're just sitting around and Willie's telling the story, and about how how they spent the Christmas at the cabin, and everybody's just kind of like, "Oh, that's great," but they're also kind of upset that there's an outhouse and and all sorts of things. There's no electricity, so there's no TV. There's really nothing for them to do per se. And I think that they're all a little frustrated. But that's when Alf, like as a gesture of peace, he brings in some holly to hang up. This is a good bit. I like this bit. And so he gives it to Willie, and Willie's like, "All right." And he's holding it, and you can see him start to slowly, scratch. And it turns out, he's, after he gets upset with Alf, he's like, "Well, at least I can hang up this holly." And that's when, the little boy, is it Brian? I think it's Brian.
Yeah.
Says, "Well, I think that's actually poison oak." And he's so funny because he does like what I do when I'm not sure about something. It's like, "Wait, is it, is this poison oak?" He's asking his wife. She's like, "I don't know."
So it's funny you mentioned that scene because I'm going to use that scene later on. I don't know if you remember, he does a little jingle when he comes in.
Yes.
Which you'll hear it later. When we do the little what's the segment at the end where you have to do a line?
Oh, yeah. When we do the
gag me with the spoon. Yeah. So it's I'm going to do Alf's little jingle, but it's I thought that was one of the best lines in the whole thing, right? It was it was comic. They came in and he was trying to lighten the mood, and then he goofed up, and
He totally goofed it up. Yeah.
yeah. So the other thing too is he didn't understand the no electricity thing, right? So he's like, "Nah, I'm gonna, they have no TV up there, so Alf, what's in this box? Oh, it's your TV." And then he's like, "Oh yeah," he's like, "There's no electricity, you can't run it." He's like, "Well, I guess I shouldn't tell you that the microwave's in this one."
Yeah. 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 I love how clueless he is. It's one of those things where he kind of has a grasp on like Earth culture, but he also doesn't at all. So it's
and
that back and forth is just funny.
and you'll get into that. He does it again later on in the hospital elevator. If you remember, it was like, "Oh, so is this where babies come from?" No, can you tell me?
When he pretends to be a doctor, like, shouldn't you know? You're a doctor. You don't know where babies come from. I think, and I know we're getting ahead, but I think he even says something like, "Hey, give me a break. I'm not married."
It's as cheesy as the show was, there was so many good one-liners, and that's what the show was a lot of the time, right? Hey, we're going to hit you with a quick one-liner, and but yeah, it's when he doesn't get stuff like that, and he brings the TVs, and it's they're in this cabin, and they could have probably packed a lot more, but here he is packing up the car with a TV in a microwave, and it's just like, oh, Alf.
Yeah. So again, he's very clueless, but by this time, they're very upset with him. And that's when Mr. Foley drives up. And again, Mr. Foley being the owner of the cabin who's letting him stay there. And so he gives Willie an envelope telling him not to open it till Christmas. He also is getting ready to drive to the hospital to deliver a bunch of toys to all the sick children. And of course, when Alf hears that there's a van outside full of toys, or a truck, whatever it is, full of toys, he goes to explore. And that's how he gets trapped inside that truck. But it's terrible because this whole time, while he's back there exploring, Willie and and his wife are there talking to Mr. Foley, and they're like, "Oh, we haven't heard from you in a while," and whatever. And of course, at the end, he just bluntly says that his wife passed away a few weeks ago.
Yeah, this is where the first part of this episode gets dark.
Yeah, it's the weirdest thing, in this show. You don't expect it to go this dark, this big dramatic moment. He's just like, "Yeah, she passed away, a couple weeks ago," and he's got that deep, raspy voice that I kind of like. But it was just gravelly and world weary, and you can see in his face that he's like given up. Which is kind of strange because later on when he's going to play Santa, he doesn't really show that at all. So he puts on a good show. This character is actually a pretty good actor.
Well, you probably know this, but he's probably one of the more famous people on this episode. He was Buck in Blazing Saddles.
Yes.
So I did at first, like, I'd even noticed that, and I'm like, oh, this guy looks semi-familiar. And then you're just like, I'm like, first thing that's shot out there at his IMDb was Buck from. I'm like, yeah, it is.
That's exactly. Yep. I remember that same thing. I was like, God, where do I know this guy from? And I couldn't place him at all. The name didn't even ring any bells. And then as soon as I looked it up, I was like, yeah. Yeah, which I love Blazing Saddles. I mean, anything Mel Brooks is great.
You know what? But I still want to know, like, if you were to, like, I mean, what this is like, it's still not that late, but maybe 15 years later, but he aged pretty heavily since
he did, yeah.
Since that, but you just wouldn't know. And I'm like, yeah, looking through all the characters, I'm like, yeah, most definitely I don't even know if it's that famous, but he was the most famous person in that episode, or done anything else. No. But it's just weird seeing someone. It's so lighthearted and goofy. This come in there and throw in the whole "my wife died" thing, and Scrooge. He was like a Scrooge and just ran off. So I was like, ooh, started out heavy, but let's see where this goes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's funny because the family, before Alf went to go explore, they like kind of got mad at him. Willie was like, "Go toss this poison oak like way out deep into the woods." So the whole time they just think he's out exploring the woods, and while he's actually gets on that van, he starts, looking through the toys, and the van drives away. So he has like his own mini adventure while they're just waiting, while they're doing their own thing. And I mean, it's funny because like this whole time they're trying to keep him inside the house and make sure that, he can't leave and no one sees him because he could, they could all go to prison or whatever, and he could be experimented on and things like that. And yet they're just fine with him going out into the woods, and, who knows what's going to happen. But
yeah, well, if I'm not mistaken, he went to the outhouse, right? So he's like, I'm going to use the bathroom. And they're like, you have to go out back. And he's like, what? And then he was out there, and then that's where, he came back in. But yeah, so he comes in, you felt bad for the guy because he was trying to do something nice, or at least he thought. And then, turns out it's poison oak. We went back and watched a couple episodes, and it seems like they give him too hard of a time. They should realize he's from a different planet, right? Give him a break.
yeah, for real. Because I mean, he doesn't catch on, and you got to think. I mean, it's like you talk about culture shock. This is like crazy culture shock. He's literally from another planet.
Yeah,
but yeah, they definitely do give him a hard time there. But this is when he gets to the hospital and he pretends to be a toy, because what else can he do? He's just there with a bunch of toys and he doesn't want to be discovered. So he pretends to be a toy, and Santa brings him, to see all of the sick children. This is when Mr. Foley dressed as Santa, which I love this bit. He's like talking to one of the boys. He's like, well, we got a bat and we got this funny looking guy right here. And of course, it's Alf pretending to be a stuffed animal. And he's like, the little boy's like, the bat. Definitely the bat. But he meets a little girl named Tiffany. And so he's given to Tiffany, essentially. She likes him. She thinks he's kind of cute, funny looking, but cute. And so Mr. Foley takes him, puts him on the bed next to hers. And we find out that, we kind of find out during this time that she's basically pretty sick. And it's rough. Again, it's rough. But I love it because she's playing like tea party with him, and she's like combing his hair, and as she turns around, Alf does like a slow like look to the left, and then he kind of turns straight again, faces forward. And I mean, she doesn't realize that he's moving, and she's trying to do all these girly things with him. And a nurse comes in, and I think she even names him Amanda, right?
Yeah.
This is a little nice cute bit, because I could see my daughter doing the same thing with her stuffed animals, and she's played tea party with them as well. But this is when the nurse comes in and she's like, it's time to check your temperature. And so she's like, okay, but you got to take Amanda's temperature first. So the nurse finds a thermometer and puts it in Alf's mouth.
Well, if you take a look at it, it's not a thermometer, it's a pen.
Oh, is it?
She has a pen.
See, that's a detail that I missed.
Well, because it was funny, because they put in the scene, there's a separate hospital bed next to her where they put her on, and then she was goofing. She's like, "Let me make you feel a little bit more comfortable," and she takes the bed, adjusts, and Alf's now cramped, like
like squished
in. And he's done really good jobs in the past. If you saw the other episodes where he plays well and hides in well. But yeah, she comes in and she puts the pen in the mouth, and then she takes it out later and she doesn't even check. But that's how I was like, oh, you normally carry on 2 thermometers, and I'm like, that's a pen.
I thought it was strange that she would have 2 thermometers as well. So that makes a lot more sense to me. But she takes the girl's temperature. She doesn't tell her what it is, of course, because, she's a little girl. But she just has this look on her face, like this worried, like look of like, oh my goodness, there's nothing I can do, or something like that. I mean, she just has a strange look on her face, like, poor girl, And of course, we find out that she is definitely a poor girl, because this is probably going to be her last Christmas. And we find that out from when Mr. Foley goes to visit the doctor. And as they're talking, it's revealed that, this is definitely Tiffany's last Christmas. There's nothing they can do. But I mean, where are this little girl's parents? Is she I
messaged you after I watched it. I'm like, did you watch this yet? I'm like, I feel bad. I'm the one I feel bad for worse, that she's terminally ill, or she had no parents there with her to walk her through this terminally ill thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, she's doing this on her own at Christmas. I know there's visiting hours and stuff, but if Mr. Foley's there. I'm sure that other people can come in. But yeah, the poor girl had no family there or whatever. And that's where at that point I'm like, I know I'm going to cry. Like I'm a crier anyway. I watch some of these movies and I'm like, yeah, this is coming. Like and I'm like, kind of just look away when we get to this one part. Like, I think there was even a tear, in her eye, but I was just like, yeah, I can't. She's like, oh, this is Alf. And I'm like, yeah, it is.
It was, it was definitely something.
Yeah. And then, the subplot for, when he sees the doctor as well, is where he's like, oh, here's a check. Here's a donation check. Right. And you don't put two and two together at the time there either, too. You're like, maybe this guy's just trying to be nice.
Yeah, you're just like, oh, he's a nice guy. He lends his cabin to a family. He'll give him you'll donate money to the hospital. You're just thinking he's a nice guy at this point.
Yeah, and you don't think much about it because if anyone ever lost, a loved one, sometimes you get insurance money or stuff like this. You're just like, well, maybe he's, he knows he's older. Maybe he doesn't have kids, and
right.
He's probably just, like, I like these guys. I like the hospital. Let me help out what I can. You didn't think much of it at the time, or at least I didn't. I'm sitting there. I'm like, he's a good dude, right? That's not saying he's not in this whole episode, but when we reveal the big plot twist, you'll be like, oh, that's not where I saw this going at all.
It's a Wonderful Life twist.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of that there. At least I noticed. It's like, and his name is George. I don't know about that. It's definitely inspired, I'd say.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he gives them a check. He's like, don't open that till, next Christmas.
It's Christmas or next day or whatever.
Next day, yeah. Don't open that till Christmas. Because this all takes place Christmas Eve of 1987.
Yep.
So, they're talking about the little girl and she's like, well, all she really wanted for Christmas was to see you and, to meet you as Santa, to meet Santa. And so she got what she wanted. And, they bring up, I guess some of the other kids had been telling her that there wasn't a Santa. And so the doctor, who seems like a really nice guy, he reads her yes, Virginia, there is a
Santa Claus.
There is a Santa Claus. Mm-hmm. Alf kind of overhears when George is, when Santa's talking to the little girl about that Christmas is not about giving, or it's not about getting, it's about giving of yourself. And, so he that's like the first hint of him like taking it in. Oh, okay. Maybe that's what Christmas is about.
Well, I can't remember. Did we miss the part where, that she finds out that he was Alf? Because remember, she turns him back in.
We did skip over that. Yeah, we did.
So the one part we did skip was, she was going to put, I think, a barrette in Alf's hair.
Yes.
And he's like, no, this is where I draw the line. So he's like, temperatures and stuff, this is where I draw the line. And this girl was just like, you're real. And then he's like, yeah, I got to tell you the story. And they skip away, but I think he tells her, hey, look, I'm an alien. I need to go away. You need to help me. Right. So this poor girl who didn't get a gift, this is her Christmas gift. She wants him to stay, but she's like, look, I get it. So she went back to Mr. Foley.
She goes back to Mr. Foley. Yeah.
And she's like, hey, can I get the other doll? I don't like this gift. He's yucky, or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and you can tell in her eyes, she's like, she doesn't want to give him up because I think she had someone sitting in her room to talk to her.
It's like a friend, yeah. She's dying. It's her only friend. Oh man,
it's her only friend. That's a poor terrible girl. I mean, this is where it's starting to get me, right? The wheels are starting to churn.
Yeah.
And then she gives up Alf, and that's why Alf overhears Mr. Foley when he talked to her at that point. And that's where Alf puts two and two together for the most part. Mm-hmm. And then he goes back to the room.
Yeah.
To hang back out with her for a little bit more.
Which is a really cool thing to do because this was literally like his chance to get away. She gives him back. He can just kind of hop on. Maybe, he doesn't know. Maybe the guy will go closer to Willie. He has a chance, but he doesn't. He goes back to talk to the girl, which was really cool of him. Yeah.
And when he goes back, that's where it got really sad for me. Like, if you remember, they came back in. She's like, oh, Alf, I'm so glad you came back. And she's like, I drew a picture.
Yeah.
She drew some pictures, and she's like, oh, he's like, that's me. Because of the nose, right? So he could tell because, the nose.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Who's that?" And she's like, "That's me.
That's me.
Uh, with those are my wings." And I'm like,
Yes.
dang you onions. Like, I was like, at that point, I'm like, I cried. I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
you're like, oh, she knows. Like, this is, that's intense.
Well,
Like,
they really get into it because she even says were you scared to leave your Melmac? And he's like, yeah, I was scared when I got there, and I miss all my friends. She asked him. He said the thing I miss most is like my family and friends, and she's like, that's what I was afraid you were gonna say. And then, he's like, but I got to meet a lot of new friends, and he tries to spin it, but at the same time, he's just like yeah, I miss my family. I want to go home, kind of a thing. So he's at least trying to to make it some kind of positive. I don't know. It's bad. It was bad, and it got me too, man. No worries. It got me too.
yeah, when she's like, those are my wings, I'm like, oh gosh.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was, if you would have told me that this is like a Hallmark movie in the 80s, I'd be like, okay, you got me. But once again, you weren't expecting it from Alf.
Yeah.
I was like, oof. And it hit you. And I was like, first it got dark, with the other guy, and then this. It's like, well, where else can this go?
Oh, it's getting there. But I love how so that they're at this point they're kind of cutting back and forth now to the Tanners and Alf as well. And so the Tanners are finally realized, they're like, hey, where's Alf?
And it's hours later. It's not like it's 5 minutes, right? It was light. It had to be at least 3-4 hours. They drove to there. He did there was at least 20 kids there. And it's like, okay, I think you should have noticed this earlier if you cared about the guy. I know he normally hides, but nah. I mean, 80s TV, I guess it is what it is.
Yeah, it's one of those things like, well, he's not here. What are we gonna do? So they're like, yeah, where is he? And they start to look for him. And but I love how they even try to rationalize it. Well, he's been around. He'll be okay. He's not like a dumb animal that'll get caught in the woods and shot or something. But they're finally starting to notice. But it's at this point where he starts to kind of sneak around, and we cut to a man and his wife, his pregnant wife. They're getting to the hospital, and I know that lady from someplace. I could not picture. I couldn't remember where I knew her from.
Yeah, and it's funny because I looked up a lot of the people beforehand, and now that we're saying this, I don't remember. But I think she was in a couple other episodes, like one-off episodes of certain 80s shows.
Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, she wasn't a star.
No, she's one of those girls you see her, like one of those guys, and you're like, oh, it's that guy. It's the same thing. It's like, oh, it's that girl.
Yeah, but like they pull into the hospital, right? And it's this. I know this is small town American. Look, I grew up there as well.
Mm-hmm.
But like they pull up in this like park right up front, and I'm like, yeah, let's at least give this thing an emergency room or something. To where they pull up, and he has this video camera, and the guy's all excited.
Molly Hagan, like, that's her name. Sorry.
Yeah. What was she? Was she in anything else, or are we just making stuff up?
No. She it seems she's got quite a. Let's see.
A list.
Let's see. She was in Election. Maybe that's where I remember her from.
That's with Reese Witherspoon, right?
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
My brother.
That might be it as well.
My brother used to love Election. Let's see. She was in True Detective. I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, me neither.
Okay, let me scroll down because I know she was.
But once again, we were talking through all this kind of stuff. So that there wasn't many stars in this Alf episode.
No. The Golden Girl. Oh, she was in Seinfeld. She was Sister Roberta. That's right. That's where I remember her from. She's the one that Kramer. She kind of falls for Kramer. When George is going to become Latvian Orthodox. I remember that when she kind of falls for Kramer and has like a little crisis of faith there. Yeah, she's just one of those girls you see her and you're like, oh yeah, that girl. I remember her, but you don't really know what she's from. But anyway, sorry, that's neither here nor there. It's just she's the wife, and you're right. They pull up to this, this little town hospital. There's no emergency room at all. They just kind of pull right up front. the husband's frantic. He's like, I've got the Lamaze books, I've got this, I've got that. And he starts going, and she's like, well, what about me? And so, the typical joke about the frantic husband of the pregnant woman. And so they get inside, and Alf by this time has like actually snuck under one of the, what are those things called? A gurney?
Yeah, I think they're called a gurney, but yeah, he's stuck under the sheet so no one noticed.
No one sees that he's there. Yeah. And there just so happens to be, doctors, scrubs and things like that underneath, which again, it's just a typical plot convenience, but I loved it. And so they have her on that. They're wheeling her through, she's about to give birth, and they get stuck in an elevator. And this is like one of the best parts of the whole show, because the elevator just jams. And so Mr. Foley is trying to help fix it. And he's trying to help. The husband's frantic, like, I'm coming. And
so with the elevator, just so for the audience that haven't seen it, somehow they pushed it inside, and when they pushed it inside, everyone got locked outside the elevator, right?
Yeah.
So it's just a gurney, and she thinks she's in there by herself, right. But good old Alf gets himself into some trouble just hanging out below in the gurney. So she's stuck in the elevator, and good thing that we have. Mr. Foley apparently fixes elevators.
Yeah, that guy, he does everything, huh?
So they have him come over to fix it, which is good that he's still there. But yeah, so they're sitting there, and the husband's freaking out, and then all of a sudden the wife starts going into labor inside the elevator.
Yes, thank you. Because I did a terrible job of explaining that.
Well, it doesn't, when we start talking about this in a minute, how Alf saves the day, which I would have never let him, but hey, good for her.
Yeah.
But when he does do it, it makes more sense that the doctor is outside. And he's just like, oh, calm down. And I would have been like the other dude. I'm like, get me in there. Give me a crowbar. It didn't take off. Like, it's there.
It's funny because the elevator's stuck. It's just her, the pregnant lady and Alf. And he found the scrubs underneath the gurney. He puts them on. So he comes out wearing the hospital mask and everything, just like a doctor. But I mean, you can tell there's obviously something wrong with him. And she sees him. She just like starts screaming her head off. So, of course, everybody outside thinks that something's wrong, like she's in pain or there's something, terrible going on. And Al finally calms her down by telling her that he went to the Melmacian school of medicine. And she's like, where's that?
He's like, did he say Minnesota?
Yeah, I think that's what he says, yeah.
He's like, oh, it's in Minnesota. She's like, I never heard of it. I was like, eh. But yeah, I mean, look, I know it's an 80s TV show, but this little fuzzy creature with a huge nose pops out from a gurney.
Yeah.
Let me think if
I'm going to be suspicious. Yeah. Get away.
Yeah, birth my child.
Yes. Please get away from me and my child. But he tells her like, no, don't worry. And it's funny because somehow there's also a book of medicine and how to deliver babies there. I don't know. I guess it's that one of the books maybe that her husband brought in. I'm gonna assume that's what it's from.
Probably could, but this is where the Alf, not knowing stuff we were talking about earlier, where he comes in, he's like, so by the way, can you tell me where babies come from? Yeah. And at this point, I would be freaking out.
Oh, who are you? Get away from me.
And that's where he had that one liner. He was like, well, I'm not married, so I don't know. So he had some good one liners, but Alf, right? First he's in trouble. Now he's, feeling bad. Now he's, delivering babies. What can't this guy do? I mean, he's multi-talented.
So they open the door, but how does he get out? I don't remember that part. Does he go back under?
I think he goes back under. They really don't get in when he gets out.
Yeah.
But, once he delivers, it's another kind of funny scene because he's against the wall of the elevator, like kind of like, ugh, what just happened here?
Yeah.
As she delivered the baby. But it's just, it's like, okay, Alf, good job, buddy. I don't know what tools you had or cut the umbilical cord or did whatever. But,
I was wondering that too. But it was a cute little baby. I mean, it was a real baby. Definitely not a newborn, but I'd say a month or two old, probably.
but this is where the other onion scene came out for me as well. She's like, oh, what are you going to name the baby?
Oh.
And
Mm-hmm.
I was weird that she's trying to name him without her husband. But hey, whatever you want to do, lady. But it's so she's sitting there, and I think she made a suggestion, or he made a suggestion, and she's like, oh, that's not a good suggestion. And then he comes back around, and he's like, how about Tiff? That's a good name. That's the name of the little sick
dying
girl.
Yeah. Well, he actually, yeah, you're right. He suggests his own name. He's like, she said, all we need is a name. He's like, how about Gordon? Name him after me. He's like, that's kind of an odd name for a girl. He's like, it's a girl?
It took me a second, and I had to remember that Gordon is his name, right?
Yeah, Gordon Shumway is his real name.
Yeah, is his real name. So it's just like, why Gordon? I'm like, oh yeah, that's his real name. So that made sense of when you're going through that, and you're just like, oh, that's comical. And then and then it hits you again with the hard stuff, and you're like, how about Tiffany? And she's like, oh, that's a great name. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah, you can tell he's finally starting to get it, But we also get at this point, the doctor confronts George about his donation, Mr. Foley.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey, this is like your life savings here. He's like, typically when people give, it's a nice round numbers like $100, $1,000. He's like, but this is down to the exact cent. It's got to be your life savings. And of course, he's like, you weren't supposed to open that till tomorrow, or something like that. And he's like, hey, look, I know your wife passed away. I know she was your whole world, but don't do anything dumb. And he's like,
at that point, he's like, but still come back after seeing me after Christmas, right? The most, the time of year that most people with depression do, stuff stupid.
Yeah.
But go have a good time. Go enjoy
exactly,
Christmas. Even though I pretty much see where this is going, but the doctor's like, yeah, just come back.
He's afraid of crazy malpractice suits, I guess.
Right. But yeah, so you see where this is going at this point, and you're like, man, once again, this is dark. This is ALF.
You don't really expect it. I mean, I remember watching this as a kid and loving it, and I don't recall it going this deep that often. This was like, and I know part of it was inspired by a real girl who was sick and dying, and like a Make-A-Wish Foundation type thing where all she wanted was to meet ALF, and they just weren't able to actually make it work, unfortunately. And so inspired by that, they named the girl Tiffany after the real girl, and they wrote this whole episode based on that. But I mean, still, like, it's you don't really expect that from ALF.
Yeah. So, and I think we missed a part. I don't know if this part was before or after this, but then I think Willie opens up the letter as well, and he finds out that what he gave him was the deed to the the cottage, right?
Yes.
The cottage in the woods.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, oh, this is great. And then, Willie, it seems like Willie's starting to get the wheels turning too. And he's like, this isn't good.
It's like, why would he,
but
we can't accept
that's
this.
where you're putting two and two together. You're like, life savings, cabin. You're like, uh-oh.
Yeah. Something.
Where are we going with this?
Yeah. And we also at this part see Willie and the family out in the woods searching for it, and you're right. Something about Willie's delivery. ALF has a fur coat. He's to keep him warm. I mean, it's kind of stilted, but not in like a William Shatner kind of way. Because at least William Shatner has charisma to get him through. It's something. It's very mild mannered. It's almost Woody Allen, but like Woody Allen doing an impression of William Shatner. I guess would be the best way to.
I mean, that always stuck out when you watched the episodes, right? Because you knew something like that was going to come out of him, where it's talking like this, and where he does the little thing where he makes sure he enunciates the words and stresses them, and I mean, it was good at the time, right? I mean, I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
even now that I say it too, and I'm like, yeah, you know what, as much as if I'm looking at this now, maybe he's not the best actor, which he's not, right? I mean,
right.
At least if he's on Broadway, maybe he's a different type actor.
Yeah.
But he wasn't, a TV actor. But yeah, he has his own way he gives about it, and once, and the little kid wasn't much better, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't know how like he's a cute little kid.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. But he wasn't a good actor either. So it's, I guess when you're on a TV show with a puppet alien, you don't have to be the best actor. The gimmick is the alien.
Yeah.
Because I think when they were in the woods, that's where I think they cut, right? Was that at the end, or was that the beginning of episode 2? Because this is a 2-parter, right?
So they actually cut it, I believe, when Tiffany tells Alf that, when he goes back to her room. I think that's where it ends with Alf on the just crying. I think that's where it ends. I don't recall, because I saw it the same way you did, where it's just one big long episode. Funny thing though, in syndication, whenever they'd show this in reruns, they would always skip this one until December, and they would show it only in like December, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. But anyway, so at this point, Alf, he's kind of free now, and so he goes to he again catches a ride on George Foley's truck, and George decides that he is going to end his life. So after all these hints that we've been getting, giving away his cabin, giving away his life savings, his wife has passed away. We see that no, he is going to jump off a bridge. Which is, again, it's kind of, and this is where I say it's a wondrul life, because his name is George. He's thinking about jumping off a bridge, but instead of Clarence, the angel, coming down, we get Alf. I love how he's just, they show him riding. I guess he was cold or something, or what, but he just decided to put on the Santa suit when he's riding in the back of that truck.
Yeah, so at first the plot line wasn't great, right? So Alf snuck into the van, and he was a toy because he was playing with the toys,
right?
But then later on, you're like, you know what? It's not a terrible plot when you look at it from his perspective, right? This random toy shows up, for some strange reason, it's coming back to me. I'm taking him home with me, and now all of a sudden he shows up. So I think if that wouldn't have happened, if Alf just randomly appeared in his truck before this, it wouldn't have worked. So maybe it's just me, but I was like, okay, now if I'm looking at his perspective, I'm like, maybe this is something more. Maybe this guy was meant to be here with me, to try to save me, because he was like, "Are you Santa Claus?" Because he was like, cause Alf had this stuff on, And he's like, "How do you know my name? How do you know this?"
Yeah, because he tells him, like, he's like, you must be Saint Nicholas or whatever. You're Santa Claus, and he's like, well, I know you're a good man. I can't do everything by myself. He's like, you're supposed to be out delivering toys or something, jumping down chimneys or something like that. He's like, well, I don't do it all by myself. I delegate. He's like, to people like you. He's like, you're a good man. You gave the cabin to the Tanners. You brought joy to a dying girl, and you gave all those toys to children. And he's like, how do you know all that? He's like, well, I'm Santa. And of course, Alf just pretending to be Santa. But he's like, well, I'm Santa. I know when you're sleeping. I know when you're awake.
Yeah, and that's why I said that came in, made it look good, because he knew all the parts, and this wasn't thrown in there, right? These were actual things you knew. Hey, look, Alf was there for all these. So
he heard all the stories he saw with his own eyes. Yeah.
And it all tied in, and you're just like, this is all right for an 80s. I keep saying for an 80s TV show, but that actually blended in, right? It made sense, because I know we talked about the no parent thing, but there was only like 3 people in the hospital too. I don't know if you noticed that. Like there was the doctor, there was him, and then there was the nurse.
The nurse, yeah.
And then the 2 people came in, but you saw no other people in the hospital.
Just a couple of kids, randomly.
Yeah. So it's just kind of like throw a couple extra bucks in there to get some guys that's walking around with clipboards or something.
Well, it's funny because this was one of the a super expensive show. That was one of the reasons why they licensed out the character so much, because it was just so expensive to make.
Yeah.
So maybe they just didn't have the budget for extras. It's when the director needs to just start handing out like $5. Look, here's $5. Just stand in the back.
Yeah, seriously, I'm sure some people would have taken it.
I would have
the
done
small
it,
town, because like we were saying earlier, it was on location, right?
Right.
It definitely. I mean, even the hospital just seemed like it was a hospital. It wasn't like a studio audience set or
Right.
any of that kind of stuff, because some of the angles and the shots weren't the best. I think maybe the elevator was filmed, that it's a certain thing, but I think even her room didn't look like it was a normal set.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Well, so he manages to somehow convince George that he's Santa and that he needs his help. That he's like, take me to Willie Tanner. I'm thinking about recruiting him. He's a good guy. And so that's how Alf is actually reunited with the Tanners. So he gets back home. And even George says, I always wanted to see you slide down that chimney.
Go on that chimney.
And he's like, yeah, me too.
Well, so he gets up on the chimney, right? He gets up on the roof, but he drives away, right?
He does, yeah. He doesn't even stay and watch.
I'd have been like, well, he drove away. Why am I going through the? That's
exactly what I thought too. Like, why are you going to go through with it? Of course, the Tanners, they're all back now inside the cabin. They've searched for hours. They're just like, I don't know where he is. We have to hope he's okay. And then they hear something on the roof, and little Brian's like, hey, it's Santa. And she's like, no, it can't be. And sure enough, there's like some snow and dust and debris that falls down into the fireplace, followed by Alf dressed as Santa. So presumably he tells them this whole story because the next day, Christmas morning, they go to visit Tiffany. Yeah. And so George Foley is there. He realized that, yeah, he does make a difference. Alf kind of convinced him that it's okay to miss your loved ones, but you got to keep going on. I need your help. Santa needs your help, and just to spread cheer and joy. And so he's there. He didn't kill himself, thank goodness. And he's trying to fix something under the bed, I guess. And he tries to get Tiffany to help him as well, which I thought was a fun bit, because he even brings back. He's like, "Well, I'll delegate." He's like, "How about you hand me that wrench?" Nice little bit. But yeah, the Tanners come in. They say, "You don't know us. We have a mutual friend." They show her a picture of Alf. She goes to look out the window. He's there in the car. So he just got stuck in the car while they go to say hi. They bring her presents. I don't know where they got the presents on Christmas morning. It's not like a lot of stores were open on Christmas Day back then. It's not like.
Well, I'm sure gift shop, right? Hey, look,
I guess so.
As long as it's something, I'm sure they have a teddy bear. But when she looked out and Alf was there waving, I'm like, oh, you got me the third time. Yeah. It's the trifecta. You got me.
Yeah. But that's when Willie takes the time to talk to Mr. Foley about it. He doesn't know what to say. He's like, I can't, not that we're not grateful, but in that Willie way. He's like, what you're saying is you got a tax problem. Yeah. In other words, I'll just take this cabin back. I like to think that maybe in his will he left it to them. That's like my happy ending kind of a thing. So when he passes away, they'll inherit the cabin. But it all kind of ends well, except for Tiffany, who that's
poor Tiffany.
That's her last Christmas. It's terrible.
I mean, now like you said, if you knew this was kind of based on a real life character, like a character person, you feel better about it, and but it's just all sorts of sad. Like you have a little kid, in the hospital by yourself, dying of cancer. Oh, there's my wings. Like it was tough. I watched it a second time just to get some more stuff in there. I'm like, I want to put myself through this again. But I knew it was still coming, and it still got me. But yeah, it was. I mean, overall, I recommend it. Right, if you like '80s Alf, right? Especially you're an Alf fan. If you're listening to this before you watch the episode, just know,
spoilers.
Don't watch it. It's going to be sad. If you don't want to have, if you're a crier, don't watch it with your wife. Mine knows that it's coming, so it's not a big deal. But yeah, it's sad. I mean, but it's good, right? I mean, I thought in general, I did like the Doogie Howser one you guys did a couple weeks ago. I went back and watched it.
Oh, nice.
That's a good one. But I mean, most of the '80s ones that you go through, I think Cheers had a good one. there wasn't many good ones in the. There were good ones, right? Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I think I would recommend to folks. Just so you know, not like Jerry and I remember. It's deep.
It's yeah, for sure. It's definitely it's not very heady, but it'll get you in the feels, as they say nowadays.
Oh yeah, for sure. But yeah, it's good. But I just wasn't expecting it. I was like, I'll do a cheery one, right? Get something, Alf funny. Oof. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of funny parts. You have to go in the one-liners. The zing Alf always gives are great. So there was a lot of comedy in that too, but you laugh. But a lot of different plot lines.
There is a lot of different plot lines that I think pull together decently at the end. I agree. I think it's a pretty good one. I mean, like I said, it's a classic. It's remembered as a classic for a reason.
Yeah, and I went back in because I was like, I want to see where this ranked, right?
Yeah.
And if you look, best, TV show 80s Christmas ones, it's one of the top ones that people put out there. Right?
Yeah.
It's because when you first asked, you're doing this, that's why I asked you. I'm like, there's a couple of them. Which one are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, it seems like the most popular one is the two-parter for season 2. And you're like, yeah, let's do that. Because I think it was over total over an hour, and that's without commercials, so it was pretty long.
Yeah, it's a good one. I liked it. And you're right. I mean, Alf as a character is usually in like some of the top sci-fi lists, which I think is kind of funny because, I don't really think of him as sci-fi, but it's true. He's an alien. So I guess he qualifies as science fiction, but he comes out in a lot of those top, like important characters of science fiction lists that you'll find all over. The show itself ran from 86 to 1990. It ended on a cliffhanger. They were hoping, the producers were hoping that if they ended on a cliffhanger, that it would be picked up for a final season. It was not. They decided, NBC, decided to cancel it. And so it wasn't resolved until 6 years later in a made-for-TV movie where the Tanners don't even come out. And so a lot of people...
I don't even know. Have you seen the movie?
I have not.
Movie? I don't think I have either.
Yeah, this one completely missed me. And so when I heard about it a couple of weeks ago, I was like, what? And so I'm excited to see it, but I haven't yet. Apparently, it's pretty terrible, and most fans of ALF don't consider it canon at all.
Yeah, well, I was reading because I think they had that last episode was number 99. But to get over the hump, they say that they broke these into 2 different parts.
Yeah.
So they broke it up. They're like, yeah, so that will be number 100 to get through it. But yeah, I knew it was on. I had a lot of episodes. I didn't know it was that many. I'll be honest with you. I think I probably stopped watching after season 3 or 4.
Yeah.
I think it was Monday nights it came out, right?
I think so. Yeah.
And when I was younger, around, because that would have been like late 80s, early 90s. Yeah, I started getting into Monday Night Football. At the time, that was my big thing. I remember watching it with my dad. My dad was whatever. So it's
talk about tough competition there.
Yeah. So I do remember it was Monday nights. It was early on, but yeah, it's another stat that we missed. And I think this was interesting that this was the first TV show that was in Dolby surround sound.
Oh, that is pretty cool.
Yeah. So it's just like, oh, if you ever notice why the sound is so good on it, I'm like, well, not really. I mean, it's what would I notice? It's Alf talking for the most part, and and stuff like that. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting facts about Alf himself. Like he had his own trading cards, but
he did.
After they said that, they're like, there was also the prequel when he was back home, and there was the cartoon.
The cartoon.
Like, I do remember this.
I do too.
I don't think I watched it religiously because. But I was like, I do, because he had 2 sisters, I think.
I think so. I think you're right.
If I go back, but yeah, it's but yeah, there was a lot. He actually there was an album. I think he had an album. I mean,
ooh, that I didn't know.
For a little show, this is.
Now I gotta go look it up.
And apparently, he was Hasselhoff style. He's big in Germany.
Yeah, I did hear that. Yeah, apparently he's still big there. Yeah, it's like a whole thing. I guess there's a town called Alf that for a long time people would steal signs there from the town. And so eventually they just started mass producing them and selling them because tourists were stealing them or I guess even locals, because the show was so popular. So I thought that was kind of funny. The character apparently is left-handed. Let's see, it was the same night and time as MacGyver, which was on ABC. So that also kind of put the kibosh on its ratings. Let's see, there was trying to be a reboot, but ended up being canceled a couple of years ago. It would have likely focused on his return to Earth with a new family. I don't know how that would have played out. I mean, I think
sometimes you just need to let shows go.
Yeah, I mean,
I enjoyed it, but I just don't know how this would, if it would age well in these date and times. I mean, I think there's certain shows you can bring back from that time period. I won't watch them probably, but you can bring back a Cheers. I mean, you can still get the concept well, not right now, but of a bar, a local bar.
At the moment, there's not a whole lot of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's certain shows you can bring back, but I don't know.
Yeah.
If this one would be, I'd probably still try to watch it, but like even when they just brought back Supermarket Sweep, and I love Leslie Jones, but I'm watching it and I'm like, it's not the same, with that guy with the sweater, all those awesome sweaters that he wore every time.
That guy, I love that guy. As an aside here, he was in that Married with Children episode that I did the other day with Scott from Jingle Jank.
Yep, and that's what it made me when I listened to that episode, and then like I watched the Leslie Jones one, and I'm like, I went back and watched the Married with Children one. And I was like, oh, there he is.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think
that was before then, wasn't it? I think that was before before Supermarket Sweep.
It was, yeah. That was in I believe it was in 87 or 88. No, it was a second season, so yeah, 88, I think. But the Supermarket Sweep was from 90 to 93, I believe. Something like that, or 91 to 94. It was like a 3-year span around then. So yeah, that episode was actually before then, before he was famous or quasi famous.
Right.
Famous.
I don't think anyone knows his name. They just know him as a Supermarket
Sweep guy. Yeah, poor guy. But it does make me wonder, what would you say, if you could, would be your happiest memory of ALF in general, or the show in particular?
With that, that's a good question. I mean, I always just thought it was fun. It was a fun part to imagine as a kid,
yeah.
Right? As an alien, you see, I mean, you saw alien movies at the time. There was Alien. There was, as you said, Predator came out,
yeah.
Right? So there was other alien movies, but here is the concept of a furry, friendly alien coming to Earth, living with a family. It always attracted me, and even I think I don't like hold this against me, but I think I even had the ALF doll.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people did, but it was something different at the time. It was a cartoon but it wasn't cartoon. I think it was one of the first shows I started watching where I was like, I'm watching adult shows, right? Here I am, even though it's about a puppet. But that was always my big moment with ALF. I thought, this is a cool little concept, and I'm watching shows. Because I'm not mistaken, and this is where I think he did an episode with Blossom as well. I think Blossom and them were back to back. But
so. That sounds familiar.
It's just I think this was my first show that I actually watched where I was like, this was either this or Full House, one of them. That I'm like, hey, look, I'm watching adult shows.
Yeah.
So it always holds like a place in my heart because of that.
Yeah, for me, I think it would just be the puppet in general. I don't think we had the toy. I remember seeing it though in stores. I do, and I kind of wanted it because it was ALF. He's funny. But for me, I think my happiest moment would just be watching it with my family. I remember sitting down and watching a few episodes for a while. Just let's see, the little one was too small. It was just David and I think my mom and dad, and we would just sit down and watch it. And yeah, same thing. I think we kind of just drifted away from it, especially as Monday Night Football got more popular and things like that as well. But in general, I just I remember just laying it. My mom would put like a blanket down on the floor, and we would just the boys would just sit down on the blanket or lay down with our pillows and just watch it, while they were laying down or sitting on the couch. And so that's what I kind of remember about that. But now we do come to my favorite part of the show, which is a little segment I like to call Gag Me with a Spoon. So this is where we do our best impression of our least favorite part of the show. This one it was very deep, so I couldn't really pick like a least favorite. I mean, I have one, but it was a little difficult for me, I think, in general.
So for me, I know you always like to do your least favorite part, but I always like doing the one where it sticks out, right? It's
Yeah,
like there
yeah.
was something that sticks out to me, and it was so quirky and owlish, and that's just the way
Can't
to,
wait.
to describe it. But
Uh-huh.
it was the part where he came in from outside from the outhouse, and he brought in the what he thought was Holly,
Right.
right? So so Alf comes in, and they see him come in, and he goes, deck this dump with boughs of holly, fa la 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 la
This
la
dump.
la. But he was like this dump. I was just like, and you saw the look on Willie's face,
Yeah,
because he knew Alf was unappreciative of anything that was going on,
yeah.
and he came in and he had the holly, and to set up that whole scene where it was probably the fun, as how deep this was. It was so like that scene was so funny, and they were talking about, I think that's poison oak, and they're just going in, but he just came in all happy as Alf comes in, think he's doing something nice, but he comes in, just calls the place a dump, and doesn't even think twice about it. He's like,
Yeah, that's a good one. For me, it was there when he's talking with Tiffany, and she's talking about she could spend more time with him or something, and his response, I was like, and it's not because it was a bad response, it was the way he ends it. And he said, "Well, he goes, well, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. Ha!" That classic. He'd always do that, that kind of that punctuation there.
that was kind of like his little thing, like Ed McMahon was hey-oh, and then you had Alf going ha.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Oh man, that and no problem. That was like his other classic line there, and I'm a terrible Elf, but it's funny. Oh man, but I think this time we'll just see for bragging rights here, and so we'll the winner gets bragging rights. So I'll leave it up to the listeners to vote, and we'll see what happens there. But GI Joe, they did teach us that knowing is half the battle. What do you think is the other half?
Oh, in this instance, if knowing's half the battle, leave Alf at home.
Yeah, for real. I don't know, man.
God.
He saved like a life.
He did. He kept Tiffany's name going, but man, you know he's going to be a troublemaker. Willie, just leave him home.
Leave him home. He's not going to appreciate the
he could sit
roughing it.
home. He could do whatever he wants to do at home. But yeah, I mean, I just like, there's no way you take this guy on a road trip.
No, no, not at all. For me, if knowing was half the battle, then the other half is learning how to deliver a baby by reading a book. Which is funny because my dad for years would carry instructions on like how to deliver a baby in his wallet just in case he ever needed it.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's funny. Maybe Alf stole your dad's wallet. Who knows?
Could be, yeah. I don't know why I just like when would you ever find yourself in that situation? But
hopefully it never. You know what? I'm sure it happens more often than we think.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll be honest. I there's no way I could do it.
Yeah,
I'd be too queasy. I'd be like, nope, get me out of here.
Yeah, I know what you mean. A friend of mine, she delivered her baby in their van while driving to the hospital. She just couldn't quite make it. And
she did it herself?
She did it herself because her husband was driving. It's funny because you'll talk to him. He says, "Yeah, she just delivered that baby like a savage."
Just put that on a resume, right?
I know, for real.
What's your special thing? I delivered my baby myself. You're hired.
Who needs a doctor? Yeah,
you are here. You are in.
Hey, if Alf can do it, I guess any of us can do it. So.
Right?
Oh man, Vinnie, it's been so much fun talking to you. What do you want to plug, man?
Yeah, thanks for having me back. It's always been a good time. I always love being on these. Like I said, I don't have any cool podcasts. I wish I did. I'm just too lazy. But the one thing I do have is follow our dogs on Instagram. They're a good time, especially around Christmas. And we took them out to Grapevine this week. And I don't know if I'm sure you've been there, but Grapevine is the Christmas capital of Texas, and it's beautiful.
It's huge, yeah.
They're at Huey, Huey, and Bax, short for Baxter. We do a lot with local charities as well. We doing one now here that we're helping out. We're trying to get the name out. So if you're a dog lover and you're at least if you're, you can follow one way or another, but if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, hop on and see some of the cool stuff we do. We, the wife and I don't have kids, so we live vicariously through our dogs.
Nice. Well, definitely check them out. Help out if you can, because it's always good causes there. So make sure you help out. Check them out. Plus they're cute dogs, man. They're cute. So why not?
They're old hound dogs, right? They're if you love hound dogs, you love them doing goofy stuff. It's a good time.
For sure. And they can. What is it? It's Huey and what?
Bax.
Bax. Huey and Bax. All right. So, again, thank you so much for having me on. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, and just keep me informed. I'd love to be on these. It's so nostalgic, and thanks for having these. It's the last couple of weeks I've been busy on a project, and I did listen to the Saved by the Bell and the Doogie Howser.
Oh yeah,
and I got to this. I know these are a couple of weeks out, but I have just downloaded the Leon Red Mode one for my walk tomorrow.
Nice.
So I'll be listening to that tomorrow when we get back.
Right on. Well, in that case, I'll end it by saying Christmas isn't about presents. It's about giving of yourself. And you've given me the most wonderful gift by checking us out on our social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you're feeling like Alf, convincing George of his worth, leave us a review on iTunes. Not only does it help us reach more people, but you also get a free sticker. Now, don't forget to vote. Later, dudes.
Hello and happy holidays, everyone. Welcome to 12 Days Pod. I'm your host, Kara Zelaya, along with my co-host, boyfriend, and fellow Christmas lover, Dan Takaki.
Hello and welcome. Join us for the next 12 weeks as we talk about, review, make fun of, and laugh at some of our favorite and some of our not-so-favorite classic Christmas movies.
We got the Santa Claus, we got Miracle on 34th Street, we got a Muppets Christmas Carol, and so many more.
At the end of each episode, we rate the movie on a scale of 1 partridge in a pear tree to 12 drummers drumming, so make sure to let us know how we ranked some of your favorites.
Our first 3 episodes drop next Friday, October 16th, where we'll treat you to Home Alone, A Christmas Story, and It's a Wonderful Life.
We're excited to share this project with you, so we hope you enjoy this not-so-serious podcast over the next few months. And as we say every week, Merry Christmas!